Y'all ready? Okay, let's try that again. Are y'all ready? Well, I wanted to thank you guys so much for being here. I'm Scott Tolar, team leader of Keller Realty in Georgetown. But today, when I put these events together, I'm Scott Tolar, John Maxwell, a coach, speaker, and trainer. We do this as an opportunity to reach out to the community, build leaders, and train people for the future of really our community. So I wanted to thank you all so much for being here with us today. It is our privilege to have you here and to be able to serve you with a day of leadership. And I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about something I learned a couple of weeks ago. How many of you guys know what a millennial is? Okay, I like to laugh. See, I put understanding millennials, laugh out loud. I'm going to speak their language right now. Most of you probably look at me and think, you know what, he probably is a millennial, and I think I do kind of qualify in a way or shape or form, something like that. So when I was at this event a couple of weeks ago, Colin Sewell, who actually came and did our last leadership event for us at the Georgetown Police Department, he brought an individual who was a pastor up that had really been studying millennials and what they're looking for and what they want and how to communicate with them effectively. And the point that he made when he was talking was, think about your grandparents first. And I have a pyramid here that I'm going to share with you. So our grandparents and our parents, they wanted one thing. Most of them, when they chose a career, they were going to be in that career for the rest of their life because that's just the way that it was. And so they asked themselves the question, the foundational question that they asked was, what do I do well? What am I competent at? And that was the cornerstone for everything that they did, which is completely different than the millennials, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then the next question they asked themselves, well, what's my purpose? Why am I alive? What am I here for? And then they would go into who wants or who needs me? Where do I belong? And then they'd raise up to who am I, their identity, and the least important part to them was who can I trust? And the illustration that was used was that guy up in the corner office who was in charge of everything. He didn't really care about me. I didn't need to trust him. I just knew that I had to do what I had to do. And at the end of the day, if I didn't do it, guess what? I was going to get the boot. So I went in, did everything that I needed to do every day, regardless of whether I liked or I trusted that person or not. And the millennials of today, kids that we have now, have completely flipped the pyramid on its head. Their number one question is, who can I trust? Before you're going to be able to get anything out of them, they need to know that they can trust you, that they can feel safe with you. So when we watch the news and they talk about all these safe places, they kind of blow it out of proportion at the universities and things like that by talking about just a place where people can feel safe. The reality is they need to know that they can trust you in order for you to be able to get what you want out of them. And then their next question is, who am I? What's my identity? There's a lot of people out there who struggle with what their identity is, especially with millennials, and one of the attributes to that is really structure and giving them defined boundaries. I was talking about this with someone this morning, and the example that they used was, well, you broke my rules tonight, so you lose your car. But guess what? Tomorrow morning, you're probably going to have a desire to do with who they aspire to become. So they've completely just flipped the pyramid, and I wanted to share that with you today to make sure that you're aware that they're thinking just a little bit differently. And this may not be the perfect example, yet it is closer to what the reality is than what our grandparents and our parents used to be. Because they're not necessarily the people who are going to be in one career for the rest of their life. And if we look at the people who have come out of college since 2007, 2008, a lot of them have switched careers 3-4 times. Some of that has to do with the economy. Some of it has to do with just not being a good fit. And some of it has to do with them not feeling like they can trust or feel safe with the people that they're giving everything for. They want a servant leader. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is the rule of 5. How many of you guys have heard the rule of 5 before? Okay, so the rule of 5 is this. If you're going to go outside and you want to chop a tree down, you're going to take an axe, right? Or could you take a baseball bat?
Chainsaw.
You could take a chainsaw. Come on.
Just saying.
Screw it up for me. Okay. So if you want to make progress and you want to make even strides, if you were to take that axe and hit that tree 5 times every single day, and that's all you did, eventually what would happen? The tree would fall down, right? But if you decided that every single day you saw another tree in your yard that needed to also come down, and you took 5 swings at that tree, and the next day you went 5 swings at that tree, and then the next day you went 5 swings at a different tree, what's going to happen? You're going to have a whole bunch of wounded trees out there, but you're not going to have any progress. Or if you were to, in my other example, use a baseball bat and go out there and swing at that tree 5 times every single day, what's going to happen? Your hands are going to be really sore, and you're not going to be making any progress. So the important thing about this is having the right tools and being consistent. Consistency compounds. You're going to have results if you continue to do them over and over and over. In real estate, the 5 that we talk about is lead generate, lead follow up, go on appointments, negotiate contracts, practice, and role play. Yet you may not have gotten there yet. So your 5 every single day could be, I'm going to go out and be intentional about meeting 5 new people today. And building relationships with 5 new people. Doesn't matter what business you're in. That's going to be a foundational part of your success. And when we were in this event the other day, I was sitting there with my wife. I was lucky enough to be able to go up to Odessa with her to see John Maxwell. And he asked us at the end of the thing, what was your biggest takeaway? And so Kendall wrote hers down on her paper. I wrote mine down on my piece of paper. And I said, well, Kendall, what was it? She says, it's not what you do occasionally, but what you do every single day. And I looked at her and I said, well, what does that mean to you? And not kidding, without a moment's...
Bill and I have known each other for about 26 years. We were part of a group in 1992 that attempted to get a regional MLS when it could have worked. And thanks for both of you for getting that. Bill's from the Temple Belton area. He's a real estate broker. He's a property manager. And he served the Texas Association of Realtors as its chairman in 2010 and just finished a stint as vice chairman of the Texas Real Estate Commission appointed by Governor Perry. So he does have some creds and probably something he doesn't really want to admit is that, you know, he is my very best friend that I'm not married to. And he and his wife and my husband and I travel together some, and they like to lollygag, and we want to know what we're doing next. What's next? This is a little stressful. I don't know about Bill, but I think he would say we have both been blessed beyond what we deserve with the opportunities to make a difference in people's lives. And we see doing things like this and passing on a little information about leadership as a mission field for ourselves. Would you agree with that?
Amen.
Okay. I think that was, I know what I was going to tell you. I learned something a few years ago about taking notes, and Scott said something about taking notes, and I was just going to pass that on to you. If you are going to take notes, if anything that we said, and Scott said a couple things I wish I'd been taking notes on, but he'll probably say it again, so maybe I'll get it next time. If something comes up that you think that you need to take action on later on, I suggest that in the margin you write an A beside it. If something we say or something they say makes you think of another way you could do something you're already doing, you might think about writing a C beside it for change, what you might change. And then last but not least, if you hear us say something that you think someone else needs to know, then perhaps you would write a T beside it for teach. And oh, by the way, that spells act, which it all causes you to take some kind of action. They are also made. They are made perhaps because they were forged in fire. Something happened. They were made perhaps because they were trained. And I give you an example of a person in our history who was forged in fire, who was an unlikely person to have been a leader. Raised in poverty, fought depression, failed in business more than once, lost 5 elections, lost the first bid for president, and ultimately, of course in my mind, was the God-chosen person to become president and see us through the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln. The most books written about any American president are written about Lincoln. And the most famous and worldwide known American president, Abraham Lincoln. And yet, an unlikely person for a most likely time. So, Bill, what you got to say?
I think a lot of what she shared with you just then is very similar to my notes. Mine, if you want them, if you'll give me your card with a good email, I'll be happy to share with you. There's no secrets here. I have about a page and a third of just outlines. Avis likes to work from a narrative type. I can't do that. I can't remember the same syntax and where the commas are, so I do an outline. I think a lot of relationship can be boiled down to, a lot of leadership, is boiled down to relationships. I think relationships are absolutely key. Now, there's some exceptions, and you're going to hear me a couple of times refer to probably one of my most insightful times I've ever spent was going to the U.S. Army War College. Are there any officers in the military in the room? The War College is a breeding ground, if you will, for the best of the very best. It's very easy to fail out of there. You go up there as a colonel, sometimes lieutenant colonels, sometimes commanders. We had a commander of the Navy with us. But this was a place where they gave me a lot of insight. They don't have to worry about relationships. They have to worry about knowing which ring to kiss and which test to pass. Military advancement often has very little to do with relationships, and they're looking for some kind of key ingredient that they breed and make this and manifest it into some kind of skill set. Relationships are very hard to manage. Relationships come in all types of descriptions. You probably first and foremost think of a relationship being something like our relationship. I admire, respect, and absolutely adore this lady. I've known her for a long time. It's funny how one of us can start a sentence and the other one can finish it. We think alike about a lot of things. It's almost embarrassing sometimes, especially to my wife.
I was thinking of a story. One time we were on the phone and you and I were disagreeing about something, and Harry's listening to me, Susan's listening to different parts of the state. He hangs up, Susan says, "Who were you talking to?" He said, "Avis." We disagreed. And Harry said, "Who were you talking to?" I said, "Bill, we disagreed. We're fine."
There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of relationships are not made this way. Some of them are very adversarial. Some of them are at best hostile, an easy way to say that. But the products that come from that can often best be described as honesty and integrity and a passion for what it is you're discussing. And sometimes, who better as an audience to understand what negotiations are? Negotiations are really nothing more than moving the middle closer to your side. And so the same thing with a discussion like that. I don't even recall what it's about. I remember that it was pretty heated.
No idea.
It was very polarizing, but the point was we were able to err, and perhaps, I feel confident, she changed my mind. I might have changed her mind, doesn't matter. But the point is, you talk about these things in a way that are true to the point that you believe in.
So a couple of general comments. My question to you is, who's the hardest person to lead? Personally. Yourself. That's correct. Whoever said that? Lauren, you've heard that before, right? So think about it. How easy is it to say? As Scott just said, lead generate, lead convert, all those things. It's easy to say those words. It's easy to say, you need to lose weight. You need to stand up. You need to stop smoking. You need to do this. You need to do that. And yet when you turn it inside, it gets really hard to do. The hardest person you will ever lead is you. And I will tell you that I am pretty much an abysmal failure at leading myself. See, some people who knew that. Who would have thought somebody knew that? In almost everything. I am blessed to, generally speaking, get things really quickly, and it frustrates me when other people don't. I am also not very good at telling people they did a good job. I also often speak without thinking, open mouth, forget brain. Gotten better at that. And I tell you that because the examination of your weaknesses is something you need to do as a leader. You always want to work in your strength zone, but you want to know about your weaknesses because you will be criticized. I messed up. Blah, 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 whatever it is. And then we find out it's a transactional issue and we call the other broker and they say, well, we could have messed up. And that's a good day when people accept that we aren't perfect, because we aren't, as far as I know.
Speak for yourself. One of the things she said was that impulsive response to something, whatever that may be, the moments change literally from moment to moment. I take a little bit of issue with that, and there's a book out there I would urge you to at least borrow it from me, take it off of Amazon and a Kindle, you might even buy it. It's a very small book. A fellow named Malcolm Gladwell wrote it. Some of you may have read it. He's written 4 books so far called Blink, that's a particular book. I will suggest to you that often, perhaps more often than not, that first response, that first thing you say probably, most predictably, is a product of all of your education, all of your experience, all of your training coming together in literally, back to Malcolm, the blink of an eye. And sometimes that is the most honest thing. My dad, I grew up in a police officer's family. He was a Texas Highway Patrol officer for 25, did another 25 with the DA's office, and they will always tell you, well, they may not admit it unless you really put them on the spot, they will always admit the first words out of a witness or out of a victim are often the most truthful, because they start to couch it, they start to position themselves, they start to extract things from it, get that first comment that first statement as soon as possible. I'm very much of the opinion that the most honest answer that come out of Avis is the one that comes out instantly. Whether you like it or not all depends on what you can deal with. Honestly, we talk about aspirations and how aspirations are something that leadership really wants. And to be very candid, we deal with it as realtors probably more than anybody when we say things like, underneath is all the land. That's not enforceable. You can't do that's an aspiration. And it's I gotta find where my note is. That's not an enforceable commandment, I'm sorry. But keeping your eyes on the stars and your feet on the ground, quote Teddy Roosevelt, is certainly a way to approach that. Anyone, though, on the other side of that same point that wants to misunderstand something will misunderstand it. And that's the world we live in today. How many times do you say something to someone and they immediately say no? Or they immediately come up with an alternative, not giving you any time to further either develop it or to talk about. I have issues with what he said. I'm a firm believer that we created this mess. Latchkey kids, the women breaking the shackles of whatever it was of motherhood and saying that they now want to, bear with me, to enter the business world. And look how successful they've been. That all happened in my lifetime. My mother, in 1955, that shows how old I am, entered the business world. And so now kids are left at home to fend for themselves. And so now we've left them to their own devices, and they don't have that prayer at dinner. They don't have that front porch to sit on and wave at the neighbors. We invented the garage door opener. We pull into our garage, drop the door, have no idea who our neighbors are. The world has changed, dramatically changed, and that's part of the product of it. I truly believe that. And so we have to learn a whole new way to talk to people. And that's part of what this is today, is trying to encourage you. I'm going to say it different ways, different times throughout this. That's a different requirement of you to change the sermon.
I was just going to say, speaking of sermon, And going back to something you said just a moment ago about kids, yeah. And it's not an apology. Bill and I are both followers of Christ. We're not going to take up a collection.
That's not what we agreed.
I will tell you that I have a little bit of agreement with him about moms, although I think women make great business people. And I think part of our problem is that we took God out of everything.
Amen.
We can't talk about him. And so we're here. We're going to, if we need to, we're going to talk about it. If that offends you, you can leave. Just saying. Just saying. Defining moments in leadership. Well, first of all, no one succeeds alone. You understand that? None of you succeed alone. It's impossible to succeed alone. And if I played a game and I said, tell me somebody that you think succeeded alone, and you told me something, I can tell you why they didn't. Think about Charles Lindbergh, who flew across in 1927 all by himself across the Atlantic Ocean. He did not build that plane. He did not teach himself how to fly. He did not succeed alone. So know that and be grateful to the people that have helped you succeed. I would tell you one other little story about that, which is my granddaughter, who's just turned 3, is up on her daddy's shoulders. And somebody said, my goodness, you're tall. And she said, not all of this is me. And indeed, we sit here in front of you, but not all of this is me. I stand on the shoulders of many giants. I have giants that are deceased. I have giants I have read from. I stand on their shoulders, and so do you. And you know that, right? Okay.
I'll show you where I am.
Yeah, I'm right here. I was just thinking about whether or not I was going to talk about defining moments. And I think I will. Just a couple of defining moments in my career as a leader. Years ago, I worked as a manager for another brokerage firm that some of you would know if I said it, and I'm not going to.
You want me to say it?
No. And the owner, I don't remember the context in which it occurred, but the owner said to me, my boss, the owner, you are not like, and named another manager. She is a leader. You're a manager. This was in 1990. And I thought, first thing I thought, and I think about that in context, I didn't really know what that meant. Because leadership wasn't, oh, that was fun. Leadership wasn't really taught then. Management was taught. Peter Drucker, some of you know those names. I don't know how this works, but I'll hold it. I'll get it, Scott. You don't have to come and rescue me. When Bill is talking, I'll put it back. I promise.
You gonna hold me?
Yeah. So it started a journey for me to, number one, find out what's leadership mean and how do I become one? Because I thought because it wasn't like he said, so she's a leader, but you're a manager. It was like, she's a leader and you're just a manager. It was disdain in the voice. And it got to me. That journey started, and then that was a defining moment to start that journey. And then the next part of that journey, a few years later, very few years later, I had the opportunity to meet and hear, and Scott's already mentioned his name, Dr. John Maxwell, at a conference in Houston. And if you don't know that name, then you haven't studied leadership. He's the #1 leadership guru in the world, according to all the magazines and all the success people and all that kind of stuff. And I have hugely changed my life. I have studied under him for many years and read almost all of his books and have been to many seminars, and I'm also a John Maxwell coach and trainer and can do all that kind of stuff for him. That was a clearly defining moment. Last but not least is just something to mention to you, which is sort of a forged in fire kind of thing. September 2001, most of you remember what happened that year, that month. Just a few days after the life and world-changing event in our country, I'm up in Dallas at the Texas Association of Realtors conference. Bill was there, and everybody was encased in doom and gloom. The world as we know it's going to end. The trade association is going to, do you think I should be worried about that?
Right here. It was literally a hold your breath time.
Yeah, it was a hold your breath time. And nobody really wanted to commit to anything. It was at that conference that I made a decision to run for office in the trade association. And my motivation was somebody's got to step forward and say, we will exist, we will overcome, we will keep moving. And that was a defining moment for me. I don't know, I was in the bar, were you with me?
Yeah. I remember well. I went, wow, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I know you did. We could just be drinking, we don't have to do stuff. But there will be defining moments in your lifetime. They may already have had defining moments. Experience that and figure out what it means to you. Passing.
Along the way, you have to keep your eyes on what perspective means to you. Perspective is an easy escape in a myopic approach where you can look through that tube that comes with paper towels and only see where you're pointed, or you can see things from a multitude of different positions and places. That the lawyers like to call that the four corners approach. Take a subject, put it in the middle of the room, go to the four corners and see it from different aspects. I get to spend more time than I like in the courtroom, and they like to use this. They like to say, did you understand that somebody could misunderstand what you think was the appropriate characterization of that? The best example I can share with you was that I got to spend a delightful amount of time in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, in probably in my opinion, the highest training school anywhere in the United States, even including the Pacific Institute, which is renowned for their leadership training. And we did an odd thing now. Notebook computers were a little bit new at the tape, but we had notebook computers. My class had 31 people in it. We would come into a room not near this big at a long table. We'd have a facilitator at the end of the room with a screen and a computer of his own. They would ask a question. No one was allowed to talk. The reason is, in that room, we had major generals, that's 2 stars. We had generals with 1 star. We had colonels. We had a brigadier from the Australian Army in there. We had this Navy commander in there. We had some civilians that no one knew any of their background. They didn't know my background and weren't allowed to talk about it. But the point is, the politics or the dynamics of that room are very powerful. I can't talk until my boss talks. I can't or won't talk until the politician talks. I can't talk because I'm doing a transaction with this gentleman. I can't, and you can just make your own list of these things. So what we did was we typed our answers in. He got to see them all, and he would put 3 of the best up there, and he'd say, whoever wrote number 4 is asleep and not listening to the question. He would ask another question. Literally, these non-reciprocating meetings, we could do a meeting in 20 minutes that if you were allowed to discuss and pontificate on whatever the subject is, could well take hours to do. Very efficient, but what it did is removed those politics and dynamics of who your best friend or who your worst enemy is, who's somebody you don't like, who's somebody you'd never want to talk to, because it was all anonymous. We had no idea. Perspective being a very powerful tool inside that room. What we learn, though, is that almost inevitably there is always a sniper in there that will say no with absolutely no foundation, just flat out no. Can't do it, won't do it, shouldn't do it, can't tell you why, but trust me, I know. You heard trust a few minutes ago, a very powerful statement. I think both of us are going to end up on that point. Try as you may, she made a very good point of it. I hate to repeat it. Try as you may, criticism is always available. Somebody, for numbers and numbers of reasons, will say to you, I can't stand what you just said. I don't believe a word you just said. And often, it's because they didn't say it. Criticism is something that you have to learn, grow thick-skinned, do whatever it takes to put it in perspective and ignore most of it. Most of it is simply nothing more than just that political criticism. Always know somebody's watching. No matter what you do, somebody's watching. And there's far too many cameras out there. Ask that Austin Bomber fella. There's too many cameras out there. They know when he bought those orange gloves, pink. Always keep an eye to embrace efficiencies that may have never before existed. That's what a leader sometimes is the very best at. We just got through watching together, or we kind of did it together in a funny, odd way, the Winston Churchill movie, Darkest Hour. What an odd way for him to say things that maybe had never been said before. But yet, look what we gained from that. One of my 4 heroes. I think he's probably one of the most copied people, including Lincoln.
The right man at the right time.
You're going to laugh at me. I think that Margaret Thatcher is probably the most easily quoted person I have ever read. I have 4 books by her, and I've read 2 of them twice. Incredible. Iron lady. I grew up in a family of strong women. I grew up in West Texas, where the women would plow the back 40, paint the house, deal with a new baby, and have dinner ready. Iron women. And 20 people could show up for dinner, and she'd have enough food for all of them. I can't, anyway. My mother was one of those. My dad was a cop. Everybody's a bad guy. When I was 13 years old, the reason I'm not a cop, my mother was a real estate broker. Both of those are SOBs, by the way.
Sons of brokers.
When I was 13 years old, my dad gave me a ride home, my little afternoon job, in a marked Texas highway patrol car. Red lights, sirens, antennas, all big decal, all that stuff. We got in a gunfight. Any of you ever been in a gunfight? It was not a moment I welcome anybody to have to go through again. I changed my mind that very day. I'm not going to be the police. Just can't do it. This is not an evangelical moment for you. Egos creep into this. Egos will just run right up into your vocabulary, and you think, here I am sitting up here in the front, and I got all this power. The truth is, you don't have any power. The power rests in you. I'm only here to keep it organized, to keep it on a level plane. Read the Robert's Rules. It's always the voice of the majority, but the minority has an opportunity to speak their piece. This is not an evangelical moment. What we do is we say, we tell them, and they'll be enlightened. We tell them, and they'll change their behavior. And we repeat that message often enough, then our prescription certainly will be accepted. Simply not true. These people speak a different language. Do you know that 700 million times an hour somebody does a Google search? And that's what millennials do. You say something, and they'll go say, well, you're a lying SOB. You don't know. It says right here, Yelp says you're wrong. And that's the kind of world we live in. You've got to change the sermon.
I was going to say leadership is not created by a title.
Amen.
And Bill made some good points about military, and if you've been in the military, you probably had some not so good experiences with people who had a title who really shouldn't have been in a leadership place, or maybe you've had that happen before in another way. John Maxwell wrote a book called The 5 Levels of Leadership. He teaches that in many places. I'm just going to kind of talk about it a little bit. The position level of leadership is the lowest possible form of leadership. You only are a leader because you have been given rights by virtue of a title. No one necessarily has to follow you. And maybe they do and maybe they don't. Bill talked about our parents and grandparents who didn't care whether they respected or trusted the guy in the corner office. They just had to do what they said. They might not. They might have been a level 1 positional leader. The second level of leadership is the permission level of leadership. And that one has come based on something else Bill mentioned, which is relationships. The leader has formed a few relationships with a few people, and people will not only follow them because they have a position, but now they will give them a little bit of permission to lead them. This might be the place you are with some of the people that you've picked up as buyers or sellers. And once they begin to have a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of trust in you, they might actually listen to you when you say you should offer full price on this property. Whereas if you just were the realtor with no relationship, they might not believe you. I know some of you who've been doing this a while are sitting here going like this, like, oh yeah, I've had that happen.
Zillow said.
Zillow said, after all. Level 3 is the production level, and it's at that level Dr. Maxwell says things begin to start to happen. You begin to help people reach their goals. You do have some relationships. You may have a title, but you have begun to put a little bit into it, and people begin to pay attention and produce and do their work. Lots and lots of companies are looking for production level leaders to help them build their company. The next one, of course, is the people development leader. And that is where a leader begins not only to lead, they also are pouring into people. And they have the position because people love, trust, and follow them because of what that leader has done to develop them. A people development leader is always looking for other people to develop who will develop other people. Because as we develop leaders, the world is richly in need of leadership.
Perhaps more than ever before.
Oh my goodness. I am amazed, I shouldn't be, but I am amazed at how both, if you will, political sides have used the Austin bomber as a platform for their position, whatever that is. When in fact, here is a poor sick guy that has made a poor sick bunch of choices. And many people are hurt, and many people are damaged, and his parents, think about his parents, think about his family, think about his neighbors. Why aren't we teaching values to people? Why aren't we teaching the value of human life to people? What have we done? Anyway, okay. Developing people who develop other people. And let me just say real quickly, the pinnacle level, which is people follow you because you have made such a huge difference across many industries, across many nations, and maybe even across lots of other barriers. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, John Maxwell. And those are 5-level leadership people.
So if you're very intuitive, perhaps maybe a little bit sensitive, I'm not talking about the guy that decorates my house. I'm talking about sensitive to how tones of words and those groups that I hope maybe they didn't feel it, but that certainly was my intent, to encourage them to follow whatever their wildest dreams are. You have to dream to make some of this work. Identify individual leader members and encourage them to follow a targeted behavior that you help them see. You explain, recognize, identify, show them things that you maybe have learned, perhaps the hard way, learned along the way, and let them embrace that as their own. There is no better salesman, what we all really are at the end of the day, salesman that can help somebody decide to buy or sell a property and make it be their decision. You didn't tell them. I can drag you all over town, but this is the one you're going to buy. How many of you say those words? I doubt none. But when you can get them to say it with their own conclusions, that's you at the very highest level of the art form. You provide reinforcement to those that adopt those behaviors, and then you repeat it. It's really very simple. There's nothing difficult about this. except the commitment. People choose not to, they have too many commitments. They're spread too thin. I don't have an hour left in the day. I can't find time to, and they've got a list of things. This is what helps you to define you, and more importantly them, as a leader. Help them define. Not to say this is what they are, but let them by their acts define themselves as leaders. Leaders do their best work, I believe, almost always, that we're all part of something much bigger. We're a tiny wheel in a huge machine, but yet we're part of this much bigger picture. This isn't a solo hero moment. I don't stand on a chair and thump my chest and go, I'm the greatest. But yet you can go out there with your actions, with your beliefs, with your strengths, with whatever else you can bring out of your vocabulary and be the best. I think that we understand when we get better, everything gets better.
Yeah.
Amen.
Simple words, very simple words. A leader aspires, I'm copying her with my words now, a leader aspires to reveal value in others.
Yep.
When you can help, this man over here is absolutely one of my heroes. He has shown me at times when no one but me was watching what value means. I know, my mother would say this, if you make it about other people, he does that. Throughout the entire business day, at the end of the day, it becomes about you. It becomes about integrity. It becomes about a value, and it truly becomes about trust. And I appreciate that in him. I've said that to him. I will repeat that to him more than once. Leadership, despite its inherent price, is almost always worth it.
Amen.
Hardest statement of them all, my favorite statement, I say this far too often. I don't speak for this lady very often. Far be it from me to not believe, especially in something I can't see. We do things that you can't see. You say things with your body, with your emotions, with your whatever. And you can't, those are inanimate. Those are intrinsic values. That's the moment that you can rise up and be proud of yourself at the end of the day, in my opinion. I pass the gavel.
Okay, I know Scott's getting nervous because we're up on time, but you talked longer than you should have.
Yes, you do.
Just saying. Just saying. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. It's influence. And of course, in our history books, we've had good leaders and bad leaders. A bad leader, very influential person, Adolf Hitler. Same time frame, Bill's already mentioned Winston Churchill, the right man for the right time. Is he still? That's another story. We're not going to tell it right now. At a funeral where he sat with the family and he wasn't. He couldn't figure out why I wouldn't sit with him. You're with the family and you're not in the family. What can I say? We've crashed weddings. I'd never crashed a funeral. Yet. Servant leadership, serving the people. Serving the people is with everything you do. Your best example for a servant leader, you can read a book about that. It's called the New Testament. It's about Jesus of Nazareth, the pinnacle servant leader of all time. And of course, that's what both of us have aspired to do the best we can, to serve the people. One of your greatest skills, if not the greatest skill you can ever develop to be a leader, is your skill to listen more than you talk.
2 ears, 1 mouth. Do the math.
Listen. Listen carefully to what your clients want. Listen to what your spouse wants. Listen to the people and do the best you can to perform on what they have asked for. Listen. Just listen. You also need to remember that the experience itself that you have been through, whatever that is, whatever negative, positive experience you have had, is not what you learn from. It is when you sit down and think through what happened here that could have been done differently. That's where your learnings are. So I hope you will do those kinds of things. And just one more thing I'm going to say, and that's just sort of another little note maybe. Every year I write a growth plan. It's not about how much bigger I'm going to get. I'm hoping to not get bigger. But it involves what am I going to read? Where am I going to go? What classes am I going to take? How am I going to learn and grow? Because I have also been blessed to have some incredibly amazing people work for me, a lot of you in the room. And if I don't stay a little tiny bit ahead of you in some places, I won't be your leader anymore. I'll be your follower. And that's okay in some things, like nobody in this room is going to ask me to sing out loud. It's okay that Scott knows how to do that, because it's not in my gift zone. And yet, if you want to lead, it is not a destination, it's a journey. And I've been on it since 1990. Go ahead.
I'm going to wrap it up with just a list of things to think about. Take this home. You're welcome to my list if you give me a business card. Plain and simple. 3 paths, perhaps a 4th path to success. Show up, pay attention, tell the truth. What? Those are life skills. Never be attached to the outcome is my personal. Do something for the right reason. Be nimble and be able to turn on a dime. The world changes on a dime. Learn how to do it. Have a long view. Just because you're looking at the issue in front of you doesn't mean it couldn't have some kind of impact bearing how you do it in the future, how other people could learn, how people can take that moment and expand it. This rope is symbolic of a time I spent in Carlisle. They gave us that rope when we first got there and made us carry it everywhere. You took it to mess, you took it to class. You could never let go. It had to be somewhere touching your body, to bed, showers, you name it. We had to carry that rope with us. The symbolism of it is that leadership is a lot like this piece of rope. If I take this end of it and push, how much do you think it'll affect anybody out there? If I can influence you, if I can persuade you there is a rainbow at the end of this journey, and you hold on to it, I can drag you to the ends of the earth. Leadership is always from the front of the room, period. That Napoleonic stand at the top of the hill and say, go die. It's not effective. Never been effective. Well, that's a whole different story.
Except in military.
In the midst of chaos, get really, really, really still. The answer will find you. Hard lesson to learn. We've grown up in a time when combat was hand to hand. And all you have, I said this earlier, all you have at the end of the day is your personal integrity. Examples of leadership, you heard this a moment ago, be an incredible listener. Be extremely ethical. Always take the high road even when it's not to your gain. Demand high standards for others. Simple, simple things. Leaders know what they're doing and do it in a way that builds leaderships in others. We've repeated that theme a number of times. Leaders are not defined by what they do, but rather how they do it. If I can bundle all this up into a tiny little neat package, the view we hold of ourselves are more important, if not so, than the view we hold of others. No matter what you think of somebody else, apply that same test to yourself. The one thing that's common among the people is the importance of being a leader. In other words, you're a leader first, and all of your degrees and all of your titles and all of that alphabetic soup at the end of your business card are simply appendages. You define what you are.
No title.
the best, in my summation, the best leader was George Washington. No leader ever before or ever since was quicker to give up his position as a leader when a better person came along. We've both been in that position where we've been replaced, elected to take them. We wish them well. We talk about things that we learned, the mistakes. We've shared all those things. Last but not least point. This is a hard one. I told it to my wife, and she just absolutely could not grasp the concept. I think what you see in this room, I think what you see in your office.
Being here today.
When do we get paid?
Check is in the mail. So I don't know how many of you guys know who Dave Ramsey is, but you using that illustration with the rope there and pushing it versus pulling it. Dave Ramsey says, you can think of management versus leadership this way. A manager goes out and stands behind all the cows and says, come on, go, 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 go. But a leader can stand in front of all the cows and say, this way to hamburger, and they're all going to follow.
Yep.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Avis and Bill today?
Mostly Avis.
Belinda.
Belinda.
Avis, do you view the comment, you are not a leader but a manager, as the pivotal point that made you stand?
Yep. There had been other things, but that really got to me because I thought I was being very successful and was from the numbers standpoint. And I didn't know what that meant. I really didn't know what that meant because I had read all the Peter Drucker stuff, which if you're given the title manager, that's what you're trying to be good at. And think about 1990. Some of us are old enough to remember that. Some of you were maybe in kindergarten or just got born or something. But but some of us remember it as a real day, and we kind of had cognizance. But that was what woke me up, and I went, well, I'm going to figure out what that means. I don't know what that means.
So you took that grain of criticism and made that the value point.
Manifested into what you see here today.
Mm-hmm.
That's powerful.
Mine was totally different. Mine was a line of people. Somebody says, who wants to do this? I didn't notice. Everybody stood back.
And you didn't realize it.
Thank you for volunteering. I went, what?
What?
All right. Anyone else?
Something hard, please.
I got one way. What one word would each of you use to describe where you are and what you've accomplished?
No, blessed. Blessed is, that's the only word I can come up with.
I'll go with that. I'll buy the same. Can I buy the same word?
Sure.
Okay.
Copycat.
All right, well, then what is your definition of success?
That's changed. Success in the 70s was putting food on the table, making the house payment or the rent payment or car payment or whatever that is. Success, let me say it a different way. Mark Twain has a wonderful book of quotes, and he said, small people will always make you feel small. Great people will say you too can be great. Now, I'm not going to pretend I'm great, but I will tell you no greater feeling comes from when somebody succeeds, and I had any tiny part of what they did.
Success. When Sharon Moss comes to me and says, thanks for explaining why, not just what I needed to do in a contract, but why I needed to do it. Or Johnny Duke says, I know I call you 100 times because I'm your problem child, but I need some help. And being able to have the knowledge or the contacts to get the answers.
That context is a key ingredient to her answer. She literally, I feel a little bit less in that degree, but certainly feel very much blessed by that. That knowing people is so powerful, to be able to reach into your cell phone and call.
that. Gerald Gafford, real good friend of mine, just passed away, and he was my go-to guy when I needed to tone down what I was going to say to somebody. You know, when I was fixing to just slap somebody upside the head and make them cry, because that's what I'm capable of, and I knew I didn't need to do that, he was my mentor, my coach that got me through that stuff. You know, bill for certain things, general counsel, just depends.
Some of the things that she has said that she could have said is what Gerald was good about doing, was saying to her, here's the words I want you to say now.
Exactly.
What were you thinking?
Exactly.
Any of y'all met Gerald? How many don't know Gerald? Didn't know Gerald? I'm
Sorry
sorry your life has missed that. There's few people can fill that hole. I will try to find that person.
Yes.
He was indescribable.
Funny, funny, funny man.
What do you do daily that gives you the success you're looking for?
I'll tell you.
Say it.
I've about wore out my research Bible. Avis gave me a new Maxwell Bible, and that's my first thing every day. Buy one. They're not expensive. They're very insightful.
Prayer.
Worth the money.
Prayer and scripture.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. What's your greatest joy?
Caitlin, Anthony, and Lucas. Those are my grandchildren.
I'm different there. On a trip for, partially for, one day for the commission, one day for the realtors, I got to travel to Amarillo, Texas.
Woohoo!
I have a few friends in
Right outside
Amarillo,
Pampa.
but never would consider that a vacation spot. So I did my thing for the commission, did my little talk, a group bigger than this with the members up there, nice people. Had dinner with a group, small group, got up the next morning, got dressed, put on my finest Italian silk suit, only own one, and had a little bit to eat, gathered my stuff, went downstairs, got all the way to the lobby within about 10 feet of the counter, literally dropped dead. Went into VFib. That's where the bottom of your heart just shakes. Died right there, dead right there. Little girl, 22 years old, had just finished her CPR classes. She pole vaults over the counter, keeps me going for about 5 minutes till the ambulance got there. I woke in the ambulance with a fella yelling at his face in my face, yelling at me, what's your name, what's your name, what's your name? And all I could think to respond, I am not deaf.
Oh, that's awesome.
So here's what I'm most thankful for every day, is being one more day.
You can drive to Amarillo in 5 hours, I'm just going to tell you that.
Legally?
No. But you can do it.
Yeah, there you go. All right, on the flip side of that, what is your greatest fear?
I can address that, and I'm going to do it in an odd way, an Avis kind of answer. I am a firm believer. I am an advocate of every one of you. If you work in my office, I'll pay for it. I'm not poaching. I'm an advocate of everybody to take a concealed handgun license. If you never put your hand on a weapon again, ever, it will teach you situational awareness. It will teach you how to deal with making decisions. And I'm going to tell you, the world is become, I live in a little town of about 25,000 people. The town where my office is about 100,000. We've already had 7 murders this year in the bigger town and 5 in the town I live in. Armed robberies, burglaries, violence has become almost unmanageable to the point where over in Killeen, where it's 100 times worse, the Justice Department has brought in 40 FBI agents that are now in Austin trying to clean that mess up, going back to Killeen. Violence has become on every corner. My biggest fear is for one of you or one of my people that I care for ever being confronted, not just hurt, but confronted. And I don't know how to teach when you open the door to look both ways. I don't know how to teach when you hear a gunshot, run the other way. I don't know how to teach you how to be watchful for the things that just go south in a moment. But that handgun class is probably the quickest and fastest and down as dirtiest way I could do it.
Right now, you need to look left and right and down because rattlesnakes are coming out right now. Just saying.
She's right.
Just saying. That's true. That's not, I didn't make that up. I hadn't thought of anything because I ain't scared, but I'd agree with him.
She's armed. And if you ask me, I'm going to go, we'll never know.
My final question for both of you guys is, what would you ultimately like to be remembered for?
That I made a difference in your life.
There you go. Amen.
A legacy.
That I made a difference in your life.
And what does that look like to you?
You're the only person, though, that can make that happen. She can give you platitudes and do sermons and you name it, but you're in charge.
What it looks like for me is that I made a difference so that you made a difference for others. Because that's the ongoing legacy. It's not just that you could say, she did this at my funeral or memorial service, because, well, most of you will be gone by then. I intend to live a long, long time, I'm just saying.
Your poll numbers continue to fall.
It is also that you can say, I made a difference in all these people's lives.
With that comes a burden, though, because now you got to help the next person.
Well, and it's because we train people, and I kind of think of it this way, if you kind of a physical manifestation, if you would. If you're down, if Cindy's down, and I reach down and help her get up.
Oh, I'm not supposed to get up?
No, I'm just I reached down and I helped her get up. It's much easier than pushing her down. And so that she can also reach down and pull you up. And you, and you. And
The
that's
word that comes to my mind when you describe that is significance.
okay.
Not just an impact, but a significant impact that people feel obligated to pass on.
Yeah, it's when you're in a transaction with a real estate license holder that's new and has no training and no support where they are,
Knows
and
everything.
it knows everything, and you have the opportunity to go to the coffee pot and talk ugly about them, or help them learn in the humblest way, and you choose B. That's what it means to me.
Let's give it up for her one more time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We're done.